Arthur Penhaligon lived a life painted in shades of beige. Beige walls in his small cottage, beige sweaters perpetually draped over his shoulders, and a beige outlook on most things. Retirement had settled upon him like a fine layer of dust, coating his days with routine and a quiet monotony. He woke at precisely 7:15 a.m., brewed a weak cup of tea, and read the local paper, cover to cover, even the obituaries. His garden was his only real passion, a small patch of colorful flowers battling against the encroaching beige of his existence. His cottage, inherited from his grandmother, was crammed with forgotten memories. Old furniture, chipped china, and boxes overflowing with photographs and letters. The attic, in particular, was a repository of the past, a dark and dusty space filled with the detritus of generations. He'd meant to clear it out for years, but the task always seemed too daunting, another shade of beige in his already monochrome life. One particularly dreary afternoon, with rain lashing against the windows, Arthur decided, on a whim, to finally tackle the attic. He pulled down the rickety ladder, its hinges groaning in protest, and armed himself with a flashlight and a dust mask. The air in the attic was thick with the smell of mothballs and decay. Cobwebs clung to everything, and shadows danced in the beam of his flashlight. He started sorting through the boxes, uncovering forgotten treasures and long-lost relics. Old toys, faded photographs of people he barely remembered, and stacks of yellowed newspapers. It was slow, tedious work, but every now and then, he'd stumble upon something that sparked a flicker of interest, a brief respite from the beige. Then, in a dark corner, behind a pile of moth-eaten blankets, he saw it. A large, rectangular object wrapped in layers of old, tattered cloth. Curiosity piqued, he carefully unwrapped it, his heart starting to beat a little faster. Beneath the cloth, he found a painting. Not just any painting, but a painting of extraordinary beauty. The colors were vibrant, the brushstrokes masterful, and the subject, a woman in a flowing gown, gazing out at the viewer with an enigmatic smile, was captivating. He was stunned. Where had this come from? How long had it been hidden away in his attic? A feeling he hadn't felt in years, a jolt of excitement, coursed through him. This was anything but beige. This was something else entirely. He carefully carried the painting downstairs, his mind racing. His quiet, beige life was about to change. He could feel it. Downstairs, in the relative brightness of his living room, the painting seemed even more striking. Arthur carefully leaned it against the fireplace mantel, stepping back to get a better view. The woman's eyes seemed to follow him as he moved, her smile both alluring and slightly unsettling. He felt an odd connection to her, as if she held a secret, a story waiting to be told. He spent the rest of the afternoon simply gazing at the painting, lost in its beauty. He examined the brushstrokes, the way the light played on the woman's face, the intricate details of her gown. He noticed a small, almost imperceptible signature in the bottom corner, a series of swirling letters he couldn't quite decipher. As evening approached, a wave of anxiety washed over him. What was he supposed to do with it? It was clearly valuable, but how valuable? And where had it come from? He considered calling the police, but something held him back. He couldn't explain it, but he felt a strange sense of ownership, as if the painting had been waiting for him, destined to be discovered in his dusty attic. He decided to keep it a secret, at least for now. He carefully wrapped it back in the tattered cloth and hid it behind an old wardrobe in his bedroom, a temporary hiding place until he could figure out what to do next. That night, Arthur couldn't sleep. His mind raced with possibilities. Could this painting be his ticket out of his beige existence? Could it bring him fame, fortune, adventure? He imagined himself traveling the world, attending art auctions, surrounded by wealthy collectors and renowned experts. He finally drifted off to sleep, his dreams filled with swirling colors and enigmatic smiles. But even in his dreams, a nagging feeling persisted, a sense that something wasn't quite right. The painting held a secret, and he had a feeling that secret would change everything. The next morning, Arthur awoke with a renewed sense of purpose. He decided to start his research. He spent hours online, searching for similar paintings, trying to decipher the signature, and learning about art history. He discovered that the style of the painting was reminiscent of the late 19th century, a period of great artistic innovation. He also learned about famous art forgeries and stolen masterpieces, stories of daring heists and elaborate schemes. The more he learned, the more intrigued he became. He felt like a detective, piecing together a puzzle, uncovering a hidden truth. He knew that he was on the verge of something big, something that could change his life forever. The beige was fading, replaced by a vibrant spectrum of possibilities. Days turned into weeks as Arthur delved deeper into his research. He became obsessed, spending every waking moment poring over art books, online databases, and historical records. He neglected his garden, his tea went cold, and his beige sweaters gathered even more dust. The painting had consumed him, transforming him from a quiet retiree into a man driven by a singular purpose. He learned about famous artists of the late 19th century, their styles, their techniques, and their signatures. He painstakingly compared the signature on his painting to examples online, magnifying the image and scrutinizing every detail. He even ordered a magnifying glass specifically for this purpose, a small extravagance that felt strangely exhilarating. One evening, after weeks of fruitless searching, he had a breakthrough. He stumbled upon a website dedicated to the works of a relatively obscure French painter named Émile Dubois. Dubois had been a contemporary of Monet and Renoir, but his career had been cut short by a tragic accident. His paintings were known for their vibrant colors, their delicate brushstrokes, and their captivating portraits of women. As Arthur scrolled through the website, his heart began to race. He recognized the style, the technique, and even the signature. He clicked on a link to a catalog of Dubois' known works and began to compare the signature on his painting to the examples shown on the screen. After what seemed like an eternity, he found it. A painting titled La Dame au sourire énigmatique, the lady with the enigmatic smile. The painting was listed as lost or presumed destroyed during World War II. The image was grainy and indistinct, but Arthur could see the resemblance. The woman, the gown, the pose, it was undeniably the same painting he had found in his attic. He gasped, his hands trembling. He had discovered a lost masterpiece, a painting that had been missing for over 70 years. Its value, he estimated, could be astronomical, potentially worth millions of dollars. A wave of excitement washed over him, followed by a surge of fear. This was bigger than he could have ever imagined. He knew that he couldn't keep this a secret any longer. He had to tell someone, but who? He didn't trust the police, and he was wary of art dealers. He needed someone who was knowledgeable, trustworthy, and discreet. He thought of his old friend, Margaret, a retired art history professor who lived in a nearby town. He hadn't seen her in years, but he remembered her passion for art and her unwavering integrity. He decided to call her. His beige life was about to be irrevocably transformed. Margaret was surprised to hear from Arthur after all these years. His voice, though familiar, sounded different, charged with an energy she hadn't detected before. He explained his discovery, his voice trembling with excitement as he described the painting and his research. Margaret, initially skeptical, became increasingly intrigued as Arthur recounted the details, especially the connection to Émile Dubois and the painting's disappearance during the war. "Arthur, this is extraordinary," she said, her voice filled with disbelief. "If what you say is true, this could be one of the most significant art discoveries of the century." They arranged for Margaret to visit Arthur the following day. He spent the night pacing his cottage, unable to sleep. He cleaned the house from top to bottom, polished the furniture, and even attempted to bake a cake, a culinary endeavor that ended in a minor kitchen disaster. The next morning, Margaret arrived, her eyes twinkling with anticipation. She was a small, wiry woman with a sharp mind and an unwavering passion for art. Arthur led her to his bedroom, where the painting was still hidden behind the wardrobe. With a dramatic flourish, he unveiled it. Margaret gasped. She approached the painting slowly, her eyes wide with wonder. She examined it closely, using a magnifying glass to scrutinize the brushstrokes, the colors, and the signature. She spent hours poring over the painting, asking Arthur questions about his research and his findings. As the afternoon wore on, Margaret's excitement grew. She confirmed Arthur's suspicions. The painting was almost certainly a genuine Émile Du Bois, and it was likely the long-lost La Dame aux sourires énigmatiques. "Arthur, this is incredible," she said, her voice filled with awe. "This painting is priceless. It's a masterpiece." She explained that the painting would need to be properly authenticated by a team of experts, a process that could take weeks or even months. She also warned Arthur about the potential risks involved, including the possibility of attracting unwanted attention from criminals and unscrupulous art dealers. "We need to be careful, Arthur," she said. "This painting is worth a fortune, and there are people who would do anything to get their hands on it." Despite the risks, Arthur was determined to proceed. He had come too far to turn back now. He had found something extraordinary, something that had the power to transform his life. He was ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. He and Margaret agreed to contact a reputable art authentication firm in London. The next chapter of Arthur's beige life was about to begin, and it promised to be anything but ordinary. Margaret, ever the meticulous planner, took the lead in contacting the art authentication firm. She chose ArtGuard International, a company renowned for its expertise, discretion, and cutting-edge technology. She emphasized the need for absolute confidentiality, explaining the potential risks involved in handling such a valuable and historically significant artwork. After several phone calls and emails, they arranged for 2 ArtGuard representatives to visit Arthur's cottage. The representatives, a stern-faced woman named Ms. Du Bois, no relation to the artist, she clarified, and a younger, tech-savvy man named Ben, arrived in an unmarked van equipped with state-of-the-art security systems. They spent the entire day examining the painting, using a variety of techniques to analyze its composition, its pigments, and its age. They took X-rays, infrared photographs, and microscopic samples. They consulted with art historians, forensic scientists, and art conservators. Arthur and Margaret waited anxiously, their nerves frayed. The silence was broken only by the hum of the equipment and the occasional hushed whispers between Ms. Du Bois and Ben. Finally, as dusk began to settle, Ms. Du Bois turned to Arthur and Margaret, her expression unreadable. "Mr. Penhaligon," she said, her voice measured, "we have completed our preliminary assessment of the painting." She paused, building suspense. "Our findings indicate that the painting is almost certainly a genuine Émile Du Bois, and it is highly likely that it is the long-lost La Dame aux sourires énigmatiques." Arthur and Margaret exchanged a look of relief and elation. Their suspicions had been confirmed. Ms. Du Bois continued, "Based on our initial assessment, we estimate the painting's value to be in the tens of millions of dollars, possibly even higher, depending on its condition and provenance." Arthur felt a wave of dizziness. Tens of millions of dollars. It was an unimaginable sum, a life-altering fortune. Ms. Du Bois cautioned that further analysis would be needed to fully authenticate the painting and determine its precise value. She also emphasized the importance of keeping the discovery a secret until the authentication process was complete. "The art world can be a dangerous place, Mr. Penhaligon," she said. "It is essential that we protect this painting and ensure that it is properly handled." Arthur and Margaret agreed to follow Ms. Du Bois's recommendations. The painting was carefully packaged and transported to ArtGuard's secure facility in London, where it would undergo further analysis. Arthur's beige life was now officially over. He was no longer a quiet retiree living in a small cottage. He was the owner of a lost masterpiece, a man on the verge of becoming incredibly wealthy and famous. But he was also a man with a secret that could change his life forever, for better or for worse. Weeks passed. The authentication process at ArtGuard International was thorough and painstaking. Arthur, despite Ms. Du Bois's advice, found it increasingly difficult to keep the discovery a secret. The allure of fame and recognition was too strong to resist. He yearned to share his extraordinary story with the world. Margaret, however, remained cautious. She argued that it was crucial to wait until the authentication process was fully complete before making any public announcement. She feared that premature publicity could jeopardize the process and attract unwanted attention. But Arthur, emboldened by the prospect of wealth and celebrity, decided to take matters into his own hands. He contacted a local newspaper, eager to share his incredible tale. He spun a captivating narrative of a quiet retiree who had stumbled upon a lost masterpiece in his dusty attic, a story that was sure to capture the imagination of the world. The newspaper, sensing a sensational story, immediately dispatched a reporter and a photographer to Arthur's cottage. They interviewed Arthur extensively, taking photographs of him standing proudly beside a framed reproduction of La Dame au Sourire Enigmatique. The article, titled "Local Man Discovers Lost Masterpiece Worth Millions," was published on the front page of the newspaper, accompanied by a large photograph of Arthur and the painting. The story quickly went viral, spreading like wildfire across the internet. Within hours, Arthur's cottage was besieged by reporters, photographers, and television crews from around the world. He was interviewed on major news networks, his story broadcast to millions of viewers. He became an overnight sensation, a global celebrity. The world was captivated by the tale of the unassuming retiree who had stumbled upon a priceless treasure. Arthur basked in the attention, reveling in his newfound fame. He enjoyed the interviews, the photo shoots, and the constant stream of visitors who flocked to his cottage, eager to catch a glimpse of the man who had discovered the lost masterpiece. Margaret, however, was furious. She accused Arthur of recklessness and irresponsibility, warning him that he had jeopardized the authentication process and put himself in danger. She feared that the publicity would attract the attention of criminals and unscrupulous art dealers, who would stop at nothing to get their hands on the painting. But Arthur dismissed her concerns, blinded by his newfound fame. He was convinced that he was invincible, that his story was too good to be true. He had no idea that his moment in the spotlight was about to be cut short, that his fairy tale was about to turn into a nightmare. He had no idea that his past was about to catch up with him. Scene change, flashback. Paris, 1978. The Musée d'Orsay, bathed in the soft glow of a Parisian evening. Inside, hushed whispers and the gentle shuffle of feet echoed through the grand halls. But beneath the veneer of tranquility, a storm was brewing. A team of skilled thieves, led by a shadowy figure known only as Le Renard, the Fox, were meticulously planning a daring heist. Their target, La Dame au Sourire Enigmatique, a masterpiece by Émile Dubois, the museum's most prized possession. The plan was intricate, relying on precise timing, expert coordination, and inside knowledge. Le Renard had cultivated a network of informants within the museum, providing him with invaluable information about security protocols, guard schedules, and the museum's layout. Among those informants was a young, unassuming security guard named Arthur Penhaligon. Arthur, driven by a combination of greed and resentment towards the museum's elite patrons, had agreed to assist Le Renard in exchange for a substantial share of the profits. On the night of the heist, Arthur played his part perfectly. He disabled key security systems, created diversions to distract the guards, and provided access to the gallery where La Dame au Sourire Enigmatique was displayed. The thieves, masked and clad in black, moved swiftly and silently through the museum. They bypassed alarms, disabled cameras, and neutralized the guards with practiced ease. Within minutes, they reached the gallery, secured the painting, and vanished into the night, leaving behind a scene of chaos and confusion. The heist was a complete success. The theft of La Dame au Sourire Enigmatique sent shockwaves through the art world. The French authorities launched a massive investigation, but Le Renard and his team remained elusive. The painting disappeared without a trace, becoming a legend, a symbol of audacious theft and unrecovered treasure. Back in the present, as Arthur basked in the glow of his newfound fame, images of La Dame au Sourire Enigmatique flashed across television screens around the world. In Paris, a veteran police detective, Inspector Moreau, watched the news with a growing sense of unease. He remembered the heist, the investigation, the frustration of never finding the painting or the perpetrators. He stared intently at the image of the painting, comparing it to old photographs and archival records. A chilling realization dawned upon him. The painting in Arthur Penhaligon's attic was undeniably La Dame Sourire Enigmatique, the stolen masterpiece from the Musée d'Orsay. The past had finally caught up with Arthur Penhaligon. Inspector Moreau, his mind reeling from the revelation, immediately contacted his superiors. He presented the evidence, the photographs, the archival records, and his unwavering conviction that the painting in Arthur Penhaligon's possession was indeed the stolen La Dame Sourire Enigmatique. The French authorities, stunned by the news, swiftly alerted Interpol. A red notice was issued for the painting, and an international investigation was launched, focusing on Arthur Penhaligon and the circumstances surrounding his discovery. Interpol agents descended upon Arthur's cottage, disrupting the media frenzy and sending shockwaves through the art world. Arthur, initially bewildered, quickly realized the gravity of the situation. His fairy tale had turned into a nightmare. The Interpol agents questioned Arthur extensively, pressing him about the painting's origins and his knowledge of its history. Arthur, feigning innocence, claimed that he had no idea the painting was stolen. He insisted that he had simply found it in his attic, wrapped in old cloth, and had no knowledge of its provenance. The agents, however, were skeptical. They found inconsistencies in Arthur's story, and they were suspicious of his apparent lack of curiosity about the painting's origins. They knew that he was hiding something, but they couldn't quite figure out what. Meanwhile, in Paris, Inspector Moreau delved deeper into Arthur's past. He unearthed records of Arthur's employment at the Musée d'Orsay in 1978, his security clearance, and his sudden departure from the museum shortly after the heist. Moreau also discovered evidence of Arthur's association with known art thieves and black market dealers. The pieces of the puzzle were beginning to fall into place. Back in England, the Interpol agents searched Arthur's cottage from top to bottom, looking for clues that might link him to the heist. They found nothing of immediate significance, but they did uncover a hidden compartment in the attic, concealed behind a loose floorboard. Inside the compartment, they found a small, leather-bound notebook filled with cryptic notes and sketches. The notes appeared to be related to the Musée d'Orsay, its security systems, and its personnel. The sketches depicted the layout of the museum, including the location of La Dame Sourire Enigmatique. The notebook was a smoking gun, irrefutable evidence of Arthur's involvement in the heist. The Interpol agents arrested Arthur Penhaligon, charging him with theft, conspiracy, and possession of stolen property. Arthur's beige life was officially over. He was now a suspect in one of the most notorious art heists in history. News of Arthur's arrest sent shockwaves through the media. The story of the unassuming retiree who had discovered a lost masterpiece had taken a dramatic and unexpected turn. Headlines screamed, "From riches to rags," and "Art heist suspect arrested." The media frenzy intensified as details of Arthur's past began to emerge. His employment at the Musée d'Orsay in 1978, his sudden departure after the heist, and his associations with known art thieves were all revealed, painting a picture of a man with a long and checkered history. Margaret, devastated by the news, visited Arthur in prison. She couldn't believe that her friend, the kind and gentle man she had known for so many years, could be involved in such a crime. "Arthur, tell me it's not true," she pleaded, her voice trembling with emotion. "Tell me you didn't steal that painting." Arthur, his eyes filled with remorse, remained silent. He couldn't bring himself to lie to Margaret, but he also couldn't bring himself to confess the truth. "I can't talk about it, Margaret," he said, his voice barely a whisper. "It's too complicated." Margaret, heartbroken and disillusioned, left the prison, her faith in Arthur shattered. Meanwhile, the investigation continued. Interpol agents interviewed Arthur's former colleagues at the Musée d'Orsay, piecing together a more complete picture of his involvement in the heist. They learned that Arthur had been a disgruntled employee, resentful of his low pay and his lack of opportunities. He had harbored a deep-seated animosity towards the museum's wealthy patrons, viewing them as arrogant and entitled. It was this resentment, combined with the promise of a substantial reward, that had led him to betray the museum and assist Le Renard in the heist. After the heist, Arthur had disappeared with his share of the loot, using the money to start a new life in England. He had changed his name, severed all ties with his past, and lived a quiet, unassuming existence, waiting for the perfect moment to reveal the painting and claim his prize. He had believed that he had gotten away with the perfect crime, that his past was buried and forgotten. But he had underestimated the tenacity of Inspector Moreau and the power of the media. His moment of triumph had turned into a devastating downfall. The beige was now a deep, dark gray. Back at Interpol headquarters, Inspector Davies reviewed the case file, a growing sense of unease gnawing at him. While the evidence against Arthur was compelling, something didn't quite add up. Arthur's claim of simply finding the painting in his attic seemed too convenient, too pat. Davies focused on the details of Arthur's story, scrutinizing every statement, every gesture, every facial expression captured in the interrogation videos. He noticed subtle inconsistencies, hesitations, and evasions that suggested Arthur was withholding information. For example, Arthur claimed he had no knowledge of art history, yet he had quickly identified the painting's style and potential value. He claimed he had never heard of Émile Dubois, yet he had somehow managed to decipher the artist's signature. Davies also found it suspicious that Arthur had waited so long to reveal the painting. If he had truly stumbled upon it by accident, why hadn't he contacted the authorities immediately? Why had he kept it hidden for so many years? The more Davies investigated, the more convinced he became that Arthur was not telling the whole truth. He suspected that Arthur was not simply a passive recipient of stolen goods, but rather an active participant in the heist. Davies shared his suspicions with Inspector Moreau, who agreed that something was amiss. Moreau, with his intimate knowledge of the case, had always believed that Le Renard had an accomplice, someone who had helped him plan and execute the heist. Could Arthur be that accomplice? Was he more than just a disgruntled security guard who had been paid to disable the alarms? To test their theory, Davies and Moreau devised a plan. They decided to leak false information to the media, hoping to provoke a reaction from Arthur. They planted a story suggesting that Interpol was close to identifying Le Renard and that they believed Arthur had information about his whereabouts. The story was published in a major newspaper, and Davies and Moreau waited anxiously for Arthur's response. They monitored his phone calls, his visitors, and his correspondence, looking for any sign that he was communicating with Le Renard or anyone else connected to the heist. Days passed without any sign of activity. Davies and Moreau began to wonder if they had miscalculated. Perhaps Arthur was truly innocent, or perhaps he was simply too clever to fall for their trap. Then, on the fifth day, they got their break. Arthur received a visitor in prison, a lawyer he had never met before. The lawyer claimed that he had been sent by an anonymous benefactor who wanted to help Arthur with his case. Davies and Moreau, suspicious of the lawyer's motives, decided to follow him after he left the prison. They tailed him to a remote location, where he met with a shadowy figure who matched the description of Le Renard. The trap had been sprung. Arthur was not innocent. He was still in contact with his former accomplice, and he was still trying to protect him. Davies and Moreau knew that they were closing in on the truth. The seeds of doubt had blossomed into full-blown suspicion. The sting was about to begin. With Le Renard back in the picture, Davies and Moreau knew they had to act fast. They couldn't risk allowing him to disappear again, potentially jeopardizing the entire case. They decided to set up a sting operation, designed to catch Arthur in the act of conspiring to sell the painting, thus solidifying his role as a key player in the heist. They arranged for 2 undercover agents, posing as wealthy art collectors, to visit Arthur in prison. The agents, equipped with hidden cameras and microphones, were instructed to offer Arthur a substantial sum of money for his share of the painting, promising to help him secure his release and escape prosecution. The agents, posing as Mr. and Mrs. Beaumont, presented themselves as unscrupulous individuals with a penchant for acquiring stolen art. They expressed their admiration for Arthur's audacity in pulling off the heist and assured him that they could handle the sale of the painting discreetly, without attracting unwanted attention. Arthur, initially hesitant, was gradually won over by the agent's persuasive arguments and the promise of a lucrative payday. He confided in them about his involvement in the heist, revealing details that only an insider would know. He explained how he had disabled the security systems, created diversions to distract the guards, and provided access to the gallery where the painting was displayed. He also revealed the identity of Le Renard, confirming his role as the mastermind behind the heist. The agents pressed Arthur for information about the painting's current location, suggesting that they could arrange for its retrieval and sale. Arthur, however, remained tight-lipped, insisting that he didn't know where the painting was hidden. The agents, frustrated by Arthur's reluctance, decided to change their tactics. They offered him a larger sum of money, promising to help him escape from prison and flee the country if he cooperated. Arthur, tempted by the offer, wavered. He knew that revealing the painting's location would incriminate him further, but he also knew that it was his only chance to escape prosecution and reclaim his freedom. After a tense silence, Arthur finally relented. He revealed that the painting was hidden in a safety deposit box in a Swiss bank, providing the agents with the account number and the access code. The agents, their mission accomplished, thanked Arthur for his cooperation and promised to contact him soon with further instructions. They left the prison, leaving Arthur to ponder the consequences of his actions. He had crossed the Rubicon, revealing his deepest secrets and sealing his fate. The sting had worked perfectly. Davies and Moreau now had all the evidence they needed to convict Arthur and bring Le Renard to justice. The beige was about to turn black. While Arthur had revealed the location of the painting, it was a seemingly minor slip-up during the conversation with the undercover agents that truly cemented his role as the inside man. As Mr. Beaumont was describing the potential sale of the painting, he casually mentioned the difficulty of bypassing the Musée d'Orsay's sophisticated alarm system. Arthur, caught up in the moment and eager to impress his potential buyers, chuckled and said, "Ah, yes, the alarms. They were quite a nuisance, weren't they? Especially that infrared grid in the Dubois Gallery. I had to rewire the entire thing myself, you know, to give Le Renard and his team a clear path." The agents exchanged a knowing glance. Arthur had just admitted to tampering with the museum's security system, a detail that had never been publicly released. Only someone with inside knowledge of the heist could have known about the rewiring of the infrared grid. Mrs. Beaumont then chimed in, feigning ignorance. "Infrared grid? What's that?" Arthur, realizing his mistake, tried to backtrack. "Oh, it's nothing, just a technical term. You wouldn't understand." But the damage was done. The agents had captured his confession on tape, providing irrefutable proof of his guilt. Later, reviewing the recording, Inspector Davies couldn't help but smile. Arthur's slip-up was a classic example of hubris, the overconfidence that often leads criminals to their downfall. He couldn't resist bragging about his cleverness, Davies said to Moreau. He wanted to impress the buyers, to show them how essential he was to the operation. Moreau nodded in agreement. It's always the little details that trip them up. The things they think no one else knows. With Arthur's confession in hand, Davies and Moreau moved swiftly to apprehend Le Renard. They tracked him to a secluded villa on the French Riviera, where he was planning his next heist. A team of heavily armed officers stormed the villa, capturing Le Renard and his accomplices without a struggle. The villa was searched, and authorities recovered a treasure trove of stolen art, including several masterpieces that had been missing for years. Le Renard, his reign of terror finally over, was extradited to France to face justice. He was charged with numerous counts of theft, conspiracy, and art fraud. Arthur, his betrayal exposed and his freedom lost, was left to await his trial, knowing that his beige life was now a distant memory. The painting, recovered from the Swiss bank, was returned to the Musée d'Orsay, where it was once again on display, a reminder of the audacious heist and the downfall of the man who had helped to steal it. The black of Arthur's future was now absolute. The pieces of the puzzle had finally fallen into place. Arthur was not just an accomplice, he was the architect of the scheme. The plan all along was for Arthur to discover the painting years later, after the heat had died down, and profit from its sale. It had been a long game, a gamble of patience and deception. During his official interrogation, after the sting operation, Arthur finally confessed the truth. He admitted that the idea to steal the painting had been his. He had approached Le Renard, offering his inside knowledge of the museum's security in exchange for a cut of the profits. He revealed that after the heist, he had hidden the painting in his grandmother's attic, waiting for the perfect moment to reveal it to the world. He had chosen retirement as the opportune time, believing that his age and unassuming demeanor would make him appear harmless and innocent. He had meticulously planned every detail of the scheme, from researching the painting's history to contacting art experts to authenticate it. He had even rehearsed his story about finding the painting in the attic, practicing his lines in front of a mirror. "I thought I had it all figured out," Arthur confessed, his voice filled with regret. "I thought I could get away with it." He explained that his motivation was not just greed, but also a desire for recognition. He had always felt overlooked and underappreciated, and he believed that discovering the painting would finally give him the attention and respect he deserved. "I wanted to be someone," Arthur said, his eyes filled with a mixture of shame and defiance. "I wanted to be more than just a quiet retiree living a beige life." Inspector Davies, listening to Arthur's confession, felt a twinge of pity for the man. He had been driven by a misguided ambition, a desperate attempt to escape his ordinary existence. But his actions had caused immense harm, betraying the trust of his colleagues, shattering the dreams of art lovers, and tarnishing the reputation of the Musée d'Orsay. Arthur was formally arrested and charged with masterminding the heist. The world now knew the truth: the quiet retiree who had discovered a lost masterpiece was, in fact, a cunning criminal who had planned the theft years ago and patiently waited for the right moment to profit from his crime. His long con had finally come to an end. The game was up. Delving into Arthur's motivations required peeling back layers of resentment, ambition, and a deep-seated sense of inadequacy. He wasn't simply driven by greed, although the prospect of millions certainly played a part. His motivations were far more complex, rooted in a lifetime of feeling invisible. The Musée d'Orsay, with its opulent displays and celebrated artists, had always been a symbol of everything Arthur lacked. He saw the wealthy patrons, the art critics, and the curators as members of an exclusive club, a world he could never penetrate. He resented their privilege, their confidence, and their seeming indifference to his existence. He believed that they looked down on him, seeing him as nothing more than a nameless face in a uniform, a mere cog in the machine. This resentment festered over time, transforming into a desire for revenge. He wanted to strike back at the museum, to disrupt its order and expose its vulnerability. He wanted to prove that he was smarter, more capable, and more daring than anyone gave him credit for. The promise of fame and recognition was also a powerful motivator. He had always yearned for attention, for validation, for a chance to leave his mark on the world. He believed that discovering the painting would make him a celebrity, a household name, a legend. He fantasized about giving interviews, writing books, and having his portrait painted. He imagined himself being invited to exclusive parties, mingling with the art world elite, and finally being accepted into the club he had always envied. But beneath the surface of greed, revenge, and fame, there was a deeper, more unsettling motivation at play, a twisted sense of artistic appreciation. Arthur, despite his lack of formal training, had a genuine love for art. He admired the beauty, the skill, and the creativity of the great masters. He believed that La Dame au Sourire Enigmatique was a masterpiece, a work of unparalleled beauty and significance. He felt that it deserved to be seen and appreciated by the world, even if it meant breaking the law to make it happen. In his twisted mind, he saw himself as a protector of the painting, a guardian of its legacy. He believed that he was doing it a favor by rescuing it from the dusty archives of the Musée d'Orsay and bringing it back into the light. His twisted logic allowed him to justify his actions, to convince himself that he was not a criminal, but a visionary, a rebel, an artist in his own right. He was, in his own mind, the ultimate art connoisseur, willing to risk everything for the sake of beauty. It was this dangerous combination of motivations that drove Arthur to commit the heist and ultimately led to his downfall. The beige was simply a mask for a complex and deeply flawed individual. The aftermath of Arthur's arrest was swift and decisive. The French authorities, eager to bring closure to the decades-old case, expedited his extradition and scheduled his trial. The trial was a media circus, attracting reporters and spectators from around the world. Arthur, once a celebrated discoverer of a lost masterpiece, was now vilified as a cunning art thief, a betrayer of trust, and a symbol of greed and deception. The prosecution presented a compelling case, outlining Arthur's involvement in the heist, his meticulous planning, and his long-term deception. They presented the notebook, the confession, and the testimony of numerous witnesses, including Inspector Moreau and the undercover agents. Arthur's defense team attempted to portray him as a victim of circumstance, a pawn in Lou Renard's elaborate scheme. They argued that he had been manipulated and coerced into participating in the heist and that he had acted out of desperation, not malice. But the evidence against Arthur was overwhelming, and the jury quickly returned a guilty verdict. He was sentenced to 20 years in prison, a punishment that reflected the gravity of his crimes. Meanwhile, La Dame au Sourire Enigmatique was returned to the Musée d'Orsay, where it was once again on display, protected by state-of-the-art security systems. The painting became a symbol of resilience, a testament to the enduring power of art and the triumph of justice over greed and deception. Arthur's reputation was in tatters. His name became synonymous with art theft and betrayal. He was ostracized by his community, abandoned by his friends, and disowned by his family. Margaret, heartbroken and disillusioned, refused to speak to him. She couldn't forgive him for betraying her trust and for shattering her faith in humanity. The cottage, once a symbol of his quiet, unassuming existence, became a monument to his downfall. It was sold at auction, its contents scattered to the winds. Arthur's beige life had been irrevocably transformed into a stark and unforgiving black. He had sought fame, fortune, and recognition, but he had only found infamy, imprisonment, and ruin. His twisted dream had become a nightmare. The final act of his long con had played out, and it had ended in utter disaster. The canvas of his life was now a dark and desolate landscape, devoid of color and hope. Years passed within the cold, grey confines of his prison cell. The vibrant colors of La Dame au Sourire Enigmatique faded into a distant memory, replaced by the bleak reality of his confinement. The fame he had so desperately craved had turned into infamy, his name forever etched in the annals of art crime. Arthur spent his days in quiet contemplation, reflecting on the choices that had led him to this desolate place. He replayed the events of his life, searching for the turning points, the moments where he could have made a different decision. He thought about his time at the Musée d'Orsay, his resentment towards the wealthy patrons, and his fateful meeting with Lou Renard. He wondered what his life would have been like if he had resisted the temptation of greed and revenge. He thought about Margaret, his loyal friend, whose trust he had so callously betrayed. He longed to apologize to her, to ask for her forgiveness, but he knew that his actions were unforgivable. He thought about the painting, the masterpiece that had consumed his life and ultimately destroyed him. He wondered if it was worth it, if the fleeting moments of excitement and recognition had been worth the years of imprisonment and shame. As he sat alone in his cell, Arthur realized that he had never truly understood the value of a quiet life. He had been so focused on escaping his beige existence that he had failed to appreciate the simple pleasures of friendship, contentment, and peace. Now, those pleasures were forever beyond his reach. The quiet life he had once craved was now an unattainable dream, replaced by the harsh reality of prison and the crushing weight of his infamy. He was no longer Arthur Penhaligon, the unassuming retiree who had discovered a lost masterpiece. He was Arthur Penhaligon, the notorious art thief, a name whispered in hushed tones, a cautionary tale of ambition gone awry. The darkness of his cell mirrored the darkness of his soul. He had sought to escape the beige, but he had only found black, a void of despair and regret. In the end, Arthur's story was a tragedy, a cautionary tale about the destructive power of greed, revenge, and the relentless pursuit of fame. It was a reminder that true happiness lies not in external validation, but in inner peace, contentment, and the simple joys of a life well lived. The final brushstroke on Arthur's canvas was a somber shade of grey, a testament to a life wasted and a dream forever shattered.